Jeff Bezos, chief executive for nearly 30 years of Amazon.com, never heard of it, is stepping down.
Well, first public company to lose $1 trillion in market value. The company's market cap of $878 million.
I'm not going to pound the table on this, but I do think it's possible that he returns to the helm to study the show.
Amazon has become the world's first company to lose $1 trillion worth of market value, dropping from $1.88 trillion down to $879 billion. This isn't just some sort of market overreaction either, as Amazon's fundamentals aren't looking much better. In fact, Amazon's trailing 12-month profit has plunged from over $30 billion down to even negative numbers. As such, they've been cutting jobs like crazy, having laid off 27,000 people within the past several months itself. And all of this has unfolded within just 2 years of Jeff Bezos retiring from his position as CEO. This has led to many investors feeling that it was Bezos that was the secret sauce to Amazon's success, sparking rumors that Bezos will return to the helm to turn around the company. One investor named Michael Batnick has even gone as far as predicting that Bezos will return by the end of 2023. This might sound unprecedented, but that's not actually the case. In fact, it's pretty common for CEOs to return if things aren't going great. Michael Dell, for example, retired back in 2004, but as Dell started struggling as we headed into the financial crisis, Michael got back to work. More recently, Bob Iger retired in 2020 after serving as Disney CEO for 15 years. But after Disney stock fell 50% and Disney Plus became a money pit, Iger returned to his position in late 2022. Likely the best example of a CEO returning, though, is Howard Schultz, who just can't seem to get a break from Starbucks. Every time he leaves the company, the stock goes into the toilet. So he basically just comes back on an as-needed basis, having served 3 different terms so far. So the idea of Bezos returning is not that far-fetched, and considering the current position of Amazon, it's well warranted too. So join me as we look into whether Jeff Bezos will actually make a grand re-entrance, and what exactly that could mean for the future of Amazon. Starting off with the case for Bezos, the first thing we have to consider is whether Bezos is even in a position to return, and the answer is absolutely. For one, he's not even 60 years old yet, meaning that he has plenty of working years left. Schultz and Iger were closer to 70 when they returned to their respective companies. Also, it's not like he's gotten super involved in some sort of other effort. Yes, he has been focusing on Blue Origin, his rocket company, but it's not like that's a new endeavor. People often like to mock Bezos for copying Elon Musk and SpaceX, and in some aspects, he definitely has. But Blue Origin has actually been around since 2000. So most of its growth was achieved without Bezos being directly involved. In fact, Bezos isn't even the CEO of Blue Origin. It's actually some guy named Bob Smith. Also, the only reason Blue Origin is even possible is because of Bezos' wealth from Amazon. So if Bezos wants to give Blue Origin the best chance of success, it would make sense to protect his Amazon fortune, which brings us into the incentive argument. The bottom line is that there is no one in the entire world that's as incentivized to turn around Amazon as Bezos. Amazon's current CEO, Andy Jassy, owns about $250 million worth of Amazon stock. Meanwhile, Bezos still owns about $123 billion worth of Amazon stock. So, theoretically speaking, Bezos should be 500 times as financially incentivized as Jassy to turn around Amazon. But I would argue that his motivation goes much deeper than just financial gain. For Bezos, this is the company he founded way back in 1994 that he spent virtually his entire adult life building. So it's safe to say that Bezos wouldn't just sit on the sidelines and watch his empire crumble, especially if he could do something. In fact, he's probably the best person to do something because he's already handled a far worse situation back in the early 2000s. During the dot-com crash, Amazon stock straight up fell 95%. And at the time, Amazon was still very much a startup during a time where virtually all other internet startups were collapsing. This meant that it was extremely hard to raise money, recruit talent, and gather the resources needed for a turnaround. But Bezos was able to do it. He diversified the business and launched AWS, and the rest is history. Today, Amazon is indeed doing bad, but they're still one of the biggest corporations on the planet, with $64 billion in the bank. So if Bezos was able to turn around the 2000 Amazon, he has a pretty good shot at turning around the 2023 Amazon. But the truth is that a lot of Bezos' impact on Amazon wouldn't even be strictly strategic. This isn't to say that Bezos wouldn't make great strategic decisions, but I would argue that his bigger role at Amazon would actually just be his presence itself. The reality is that there's only so much that a single person can do, but that single person's spirit and morale can accomplish infinitely more. Now, I know that the general public and the media aren't exactly the biggest fans of Bezos. Most people just see him as the bald slave driver. But this isn't the case with Wall Street or Amazon's corporate employees. Sure, they may not like him either, but I can assure you that they think that he's effective as hell. I mean, just look at this. This is Amazon under Bezos' leadership, and this is Amazon under Jazzy's leadership. If you were a corporate Amazon employee and most of your compensation depended on stock comp and growth, who would you rather have lead the company? I'm gonna guess Bezos, and this is especially true for leadership whose entire compensation is basically stock. As such, Bezos simply returning could be the morale boost that investors and executive leadership need to get back on track. If you're not a fan of Bezos returning though, don't worry, as there is a pretty strong case for him not returning as well. For starters, the case against Bezos returning begins with the fact that he never really left in the first place. Sure, he gave up his position as CEO, but he simply switched to being executive chairman. It's not like Bill Gates, who has completely left Microsoft. Something else to note is that even as CEO, Bezos was serving in more of a chairman type of capacity. He was never really in the weeds of operations like Elon or something. Bezos strongly felt that as a senior executive, his job was to make a small number of super high quality decisions. In fact, he didn't even start work till 10 a.m. and his job each day was to just make 3 good decisions. Now, I'm not here to argue the effectiveness of this type of role, but what I can say is that it's not particularly time intensive. Mentally intensive, sure, but not time intensive. So it doesn't really require Bezos to take on the CEO role again. He can just make his 3 decisions a day as executive chairman. And speaking of decisions, Bezos strongly believes in making decisions that play out over the long term. In fact, when friends congratulate him for a good quarter, he tells them, "Thank you, but that quarter was baked 3 years ago." So, according to Bezos himself, a CEO's decisions can't be judged until 3 years later. Newsflash, Jazzy has barely been CEO for 2 years, so according to Bezos' own logic, none of this is Jazzy's fault. All of it is actually Bezos' fault, as the decisions that led to Amazon's current situation were actually made in 2019 and 2020 when Bezos was CEO. So while it may seem like Jazzy taking over is what screwed up Amazon, the real culprit was actually Bezos' last decisions before he retired. So by that logic, it makes no sense for Bezos to take over once again, as this was all his fault. Also, Jazzy hasn't had enough time to really be judged as a CEO yet, so it's not really fair to replace him just yet. The reality is that Jazzy is actually super qualified to be CEO. I mean, that's why he was picked for the job in the first place. He joined the company way back in 1997 before the dot-com bust, so he was also very much involved in Amazon's dot-com turnaround. In fact, you could argue that Jazzy was the architect of Amazon's turnaround. Bezos' original idea to turn around the company was to actually launch something called Merchant.com. The service was supposed to help other retailers set up their own e-commerce platforms, similar to Shopify. But this turned out to be a massive failure, and that's why Bezos allowed Jazzy to start up AWS, or the cloud side of Amazon. And ever since then, AWS has been the lifeblood of Amazon. In fact, it's the only reason that the retail business was even viable, as AWS was able to pay for all the losses and upfront investments. This is true even today, as Amazon's retail business is still teetering between profitability and unprofitability. So really, it was Jazzy that turned around Amazon back in the 2000s. So from that perspective, it actually makes more sense to give Jazzy a shot than Bezos a shot. It would also play out much better on the media, which brings us into our next point, which is that Bezos is a PR nightmare. It's no secret that the media hates Bezos, and there are plenty of good reasons to hold a grudge against the guy. The reality, though, is that his involvement or lack of involvement doesn't really change any of the bad attributes of Amazon. It's not like the lives of warehouse and delivery workers suddenly became magical after Bezos' departure. It's also not like Amazon suddenly stopped avoiding taxes as much as possible. But when Bezos is not directly involved, all of this is just written off as a big evil corporation doing big evil corporation things. When Bezos is involved, however, it all of a sudden becomes personal. It's no longer Amazon that's causing all this damage. It's actually Bezos, the world's richest man, that's doing all this. He's the reason. He's the one abusing warehouse workers. He's the one evading taxes. He's the physical manifestation of evil rich dude. Whether this is accurate or not is irrelevant. When the public has such a large bias against the dude, probably not the best idea to put him back in the spotlight, especially as a consumer business. Clearly, there's quite a few reasons going for and against Bezos, but what does Bezos think? Well, he hasn't publicly talked about the situation, but that doesn't really mean anything. This isn't the type of situation that you plan on. I mean, there's a reason that he retired. Bob Iger, for example, says that he was very surprised by his own return to Disney. So Bezos hasn't exactly dropped any specific hints, but we can dubiously speculate based on his principles and overall thoughts. While Bezos is likely disappointed by the current state of Amazon, I don't think he's particularly surprised. In fact, he's been anticipating this moment for his entire career, as he always knew that Amazon's downfall was inevitable.
Companies have short lifespans, Charlie, and Amazon will be disrupted one day.
And you worry about that?
I don't worry about it because I know it's inevitable. Companies come and go. And the companies that are the shiniest and most important of any era, you wait a few decades and they're gone.
And your job is to make sure that you delay that date.
I would love for it to be after I'm dead.
With that in mind, Bezos could return to Amazon, but what's the purpose? Sure, he might be able to turn around the company and get them to $2, $3, $5 trillion, but what does that accomplish? He'll just be even more hated, and it's not like he would have saved Amazon completely. He would have simply delayed their downfall by another 10 or 20 years, but the eventual death of Amazon is still inevitable. So why waste time on such a vanity metric, especially when he could be working on rockets or his Earth Fund and hopefully actually create long-term change? This is precisely what Bill Gates did. After he left in 2000, Microsoft got destroyed. In fact, the stock didn't move for the next 17 years. But Gates didn't come back. He actually stepped back further, sold more stock, and focused even more on his foundation. And given that Bezos has also reduced his stake down to the single digits, I'm pretty sure that Bezos leans on the side of not returning. But who knows, Amazon is his baby. So I'm sure he'll have a tough time just watching the carnage from the sidelines. It's not just Amazon that's facing an existential crisis. All of big tech is going through similar turmoil. If you'd like to learn why all monopolies eventually fail, check out this video. But until then, I'm Hari, and I'll see you guys on the next one.